Okay, so the last thing I need all of us to do is to take a deep breath. Are you ready? Big inhale. Exhale. We've been talking about this sermon series for a few weeks. It's going to stir up some emotions. It's going to stir up some anxiety. And specifically, this video that kicks off the sermon series might do just that. I encourage you to pay close attention to some of the hateful messages that are mentioned.
Weird, awkward, creepy.
She slept her way to the top. She has no credibility. All she does is laugh.
Far from having conservative values, Trump has no values.
It looked like he might have used the big boy stairs and everything.
And scrambled beyond recognition, he seems visibly confused and nonsensical.
Because unlike Rocky, Kamala can't blame her bizarre speeches on repeated blows to the head.
You called your opponent an existential threat. On a call a week ago, you said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye.
They're turning crooked Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of the United States, into a hero.
Just who does he think he is?
Clearly the most dangerous president in our history.
The convicted felon and the wannabe hillbilly, selling snake oil to ordinary Americans.
America's new political war pits young men against young women. Trump is back to insulting his opponents despite reported transformation.
I'd love to be nice, but I'm dealing against real garbage.
Everything out of Donald Trump's mouth is real garbage. Donald Trump is a pollutant.
Let's go, Brandon! Let's go, Brandon!
Atheist, humanist, gay rights groups tagged as intolerant.
The same old nonsense, just talking points and denigrating folks. And
most disliked women in America, no matter which side of the political aisle you found yourself on.
We can make all the jokes about Harris that we want, and I've made plenty of them. I'll continue to make them because it's fun to mock her. She deserves it.
Gen Z doesn't want a washed-up wannabe dictator and convicted felon to represent them.
Failure of a leader that has refused to lead by strength.
She was so disliked and such a bad candidate.
Westboro Baptist Church is arguably the most obnoxious and rabid hate group in America.
The Democrats are full of crap. They're about themselves, they're about power, they're about division.
D.C. is seeing more divorces and custody battles over politics.
We should redirect our focus to his weaknesses, his indulgences.
Dumb as a rock, Kamala Harris, from a totally failed and insignificant vice president into a future great president. No, it just doesn't work that way.
An apparent airhead.
Cataloged and tracked all of the hate and hate groups that we could find on the left.
A country of chaos, of fear, of hate.
She's a radical left lunatic. She'll destroy our country. She wants open borders.
Whose ideas are dangerous, their ideas are extreme, and their ideas are weird.
She's a bit of a ding-dong. And number two, that she is a member of the loon wing of the Democratic Party.
J.D. Vance, just dumb Vance, is pretty weird.
Deep breath, right? You might want to take another one. I read a poll not long ago that said 8 out of 10 Americans today say that the biggest source of stress in their life is politics. How many of you are the 8, right? How many of you would say, I'm one of the 2, there's something else that is a little bit higher on my stress scale? I watch video clips like that and I feel the cortisol level in my body just rise. I told you this a couple weeks ago. 2020, 4 years ago, which it felt like in 2020 I kept hearing people use that almost as a cuss word, right? What, in the 2020? I heard that some, and I would giggle when I would hear that. During that season of weirdness, by the way, that was a political year as well, and all the COVID weirdness, and in the middle of that, I canceled my cable. Why? Because my emotional health could not handle it. I feel like 2024, well, might be another cuss word. What in the 2024? Is anybody else feeling deja vu? And guys, it's not just politics. Last week, my social media feed was filled with my faith community fighting it out. I don't know if you read up on the controversy surrounding the opening ceremony for the Olympics. I didn't know anything had happened until Saturday morning. Friday, it was on in my house. I was working on a house project, just kind of walking through, and occasionally I would see something that looked like artistic expression. I walked through one time and there was a very scantily clad woman dancing on the screen, and I kind of reacted to that, but I had no idea the controversy that was happening until Saturday morning. I was looking at Twitter, and well, you would recognize his name if I said it, a nationally known preacher that I respect and I follow. He came out guns ablazing. And then I watched my Facebook feed. This preacher say this preacher say this Christian that I know somewhere else in our country or even across the globe. It just felt like we were doing this. And I couldn't help but think, man, if we would just get in a room and have a conversation and listen to one another, I kind of wonder if there might be some common ground to be found, and we could talk it out. The world is watching us. This is an important series. Don't miss a week. Please make it a point to be here. Take a deep breath. How many of you, maybe you're online joining us? I've had people text me this morning that are driving back from vacation and joining online. Maybe you're in the room. How many of you would say you're a little stressed about the future of our country right now? I feel that. How many of you would say you're a little bit nervous about the election in November? Yeah, I feel that as well. I feel that, and then I feel other things about standing up here in the pulpit and talking about such things. I just read a very recent poll released, I think it was last Thursday. You can check me on this. This came from Lifeway Research. Says that more than 1 in 5, 22% of people who left one church for another recently, they did it because they couldn't agree on politics. Gives me pause. We're starting a 4-week sermon series today. We're calling it The Separation of Church and Hate. I want to tell you how much I've overthought all of this, including the colors that we've used in that image. Is somebody going to think we're projecting this party or this ideology over another? Why? Because we see everything through our filter of red or blue. 4 topics we're going to engage with over the next month. Civility, that's what we're talking about today. Dignity, humility, unity. By the way, I'm excited not just about the whole series, but the last week of this series, Kyle Hilgendorf just hosted. He has a gift for speaking. I'm excited. He, on behalf of our whole elder team, I'm excited. You're going to get to hear from our elders on this topic as well. Kyle is going to be preaching that last week of the series on that important topic of unity. Would you agree, as a church family that's a part of a larger faith community, that's an important topic? Each of these is an important topic. Civility is what I want to talk about today. The passage that you just saw typed out, that's Jesus, in case you missed that. The Sermon on the Mount, most powerful sermon ever preached. This is what he says in Matthew chapter 5. You've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Have you ever caught the qualifying clause on the back of that? So that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. This is pretty important that we're leaning into today. It's no surprise, since I've announced this series, I've heard people on both sides of the political aisle reaching out to me saying, I'm so glad you're going to be doing this series because you need to tell them. Fill in the blank, Republicrats. Tell them that they are wrong. But I appreciate Billy Graham's approach. Have you ever seen this quote? I hadn't until a few weeks ago. he prayed with was pastor to both sides of the aisle, presidentially speaking. I love this. You know, I'm not for the left wing, I'm not for the right wing, I'm for the whole bird. I like that approach. And I think that's what Jesus might be about today. You should know I'm not going to raise a Republican flag or a Democrat flag, only Jesus and what he taught. So here's my question for you for the next several weeks. Wrestle with this. Are you willing to put your faith filter ahead of your political filter? Before you knee-jerk react and say, well, yeah, of course, preacher, I'll do that. Count the cost. Think about that. This gets complicated. Everybody in the room would say, well, yeah, I'll do that. But this is what we need to understand about each other. Republicans are absolutely convinced that Jesus would be a Republican. Why? Well, because of their values. Democrats would say that Jesus absolutely would be a Democrat. Why? Because of his care and his concern for the less fortunate. Let me show you what I mean by that. Jesus said, let the little children come to me. Remember this? The question is, which children? Which children? The ones in the womb that one side is trying to protect? Or the immigrant babies? Or the poor babies without health care that the other side is trying to protect? I mean, would Jesus choose between them? Years ago, I was a foster parent in a liberal city. We were serving in Bloomington. I don't know if you know much about the politics of Monroe County and Bloomington, Indiana, but it's a liberal city inside of a larger conservative county. You get just a few minutes outside of Bloomington any direction, and you lose some of the influence of the university, and you're in generational farm country. And I loved that about worshiping in that church and serving in that church. I would see a Democrat sitting next to a Republican, and I would know that they'd fight it out somewhere else. But today, together, they're sitting in the same pew and they're worshiping together. I felt so much angst during 2020, that cuss word year 4 years ago, when I heard some of the stories about those two people not being able to get along to the point where they weren't even willing to worship together in the same space anymore. During that season, being a foster care advocate, and then we got to celebrate our Gotcha Day last Thursday. We got to adopt 4 of our 5 kids in the courtroom in Monroe County 18 years ago last Thursday. During the season, gearing up for that, taking all the classes for foster parenting, I grew up in a very conservative environment. My faith filter and my political filter got a little bit rocked during that season. My political filter did. I was sitting next to people who were diehard Democrats, and oh my goodness, when I heard care and conviction coming out of their mouths, they were articulating a whole life perspective from womb to tomb. It challenged my political filter, putting your faith filter ahead of your political filter. Because here's the thing. The problem is you can make the Bible say a whole lot of things. You can, and we have. Listen, the Bible has been used for a long time. My goodness, it was the biggest proof text forever for slavery. When I was a kid, I heard the Bible used as proof text to prohibit tattoos. I pierced my ear in college. Worst fashion choice I've ever made. Wham broke up. I took it out and moved on. But during that season, I heard some pretty weird things that Christians would say, and they'd use the Bible as their proof text. Long hair on guys when I was a kid. Women with their hair uncovered. The Bible's been used as a proof text there. Not drinking alcohol. Being a Cubs fan. I told you Kyle is preaching week 4 of this series. I gotta be careful because he's gonna get the last word here, but shots fired. If you know anything about Kyle, he is a strong Cubs fan. There's a verse. Let me prove this to you. Long-suffering Cubs fans, here's the verse. Job chapter 7, verse 3. So I am allotted months of emptiness, and nights of misery are appointed to me. Wait a minute, maybe that's the advocation for. Either way, I can find a verse that prohibits all of those things, and that doesn't mean, well, taking it out of context. Here's the deal. When you interpret the words of Jesus through your political filter, it's amazing how often he agrees with you. Let me say that again. When you interpret the words of Jesus through your own political filter, he will agree with you every time. I have members of my family that are on both sides of the aisle. I want to share with you, this is not intended to give you the right view, this series. That's not possible. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. You're still going to have to choose. This is not intended to change the way we respond in who we vote for, but rather how we engage with one another inside this room and outside this room in this contentious political environment. We're going to have to stop making assumptions about people, because here's the thing. If you gave me the assignment to preach a sermon, I could demonstrate the Republican platform, be in sync with Jesus' teaching. I could preach a sermon there. And if somebody else were to come and say, Stan, would you create a sermon to show the Democrat platform and how it's in sync with the teachings of Jesus? I could do that too, because when you interpret the words of Jesus through your political filter, it's amazing how often he agrees with you. I'm not wanting to change your mind. Rather, I want to talk about how now shall we live? How do we treat one another? If you have your Bible with you, go ahead and grab it and open it up to James chapter 1. It's so important that we look at the book of James. There's a reason why this is included in the wisdom literature in the canon of Scripture. We're talking about dignity, civility, humility, and unity. Today we're talking about civility, and I would make this statement: we have lost the art of civility today. And I'm tempted to say, we've gone downhill very recently in this topic. Truth be told, though, if you go back to the first century when our movement was birthed, James led through some pretty contentious seasons. Dare I say, it even became political. Jesus dies, ascends to heaven, reigns as King Jesus from heaven, and James is left to be one of those early leaders in the movement. And if you have read the book of Acts, by the way, do it sometime, there's some contention there. Read the Jerusalem councils. They battle it out. How in the world does this faith that was Jewish in nature, how does it go to the whole globe, and what needs to change? And there's even some politics, some ideology that has to get wrestled to the ground. James knew a thing or two about civility. In the past, we could disagree with somebody, but now there's so much anger. Instead of criticizing content, somewhere along the way in my lifetime, it feels like it's gone to attacking character. I'd point to the video we just watched as Exhibit A. Instead of saying, I disagree with you, it's become, you're an idiot because you disagree with me. When we criticize content, we're arguing about ideas. But when we move to attacking character, well now, Jesus had a thing or two to say about it, didn't he? Judging people. Be so careful. Most of the time, this process, it just ain't civil. James has some things to say about this. And during this contentious political season, I believe he gives us 4 primary tools that we can put in our toolbox. You can unpack these in the cul-de-sac in a conversation, in the office when it starts to feel heated. This Thanksgiving dinner, where that uncle or that aunt, or maybe you're the weird uncle, and you spout off. These are 4 tools for your toolbox. I want to unpack them together today. Are you there? James chapter 1, let's look at verse 19 and following. This is what he has to say. My dear brothers and sisters, hold on to that thought. We're coming back to it. Take note of this. Everyone, not some, not a few, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. That'll preach today, won't it? Because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent. Some of you, we read that phrase and you're immediately thinking about them. Didn't you? This is personal. Bring this in. He's talking to you. He's talking to my heart. And humbly, through that lens, accept the word planted in you, which can save you. This is big. There is some really helpful and, dare I say, healthy things here that we need to unpack together. Remember, 4 tools in your toolbox. If you're not taking notes, get out something to write this down. This is your toolkit for Thanksgiving dinner and the months in between. Number 1, remember relationships. Remember relationships. What did he say? My dear brothers and sisters, can I remind you, James is the brother of Jesus? He's calling the church family, my brothers and sisters. You are my brother. You are my sister. We're family. We're in this thing together. And if he's the brother of Jesus, how much value does that add to my identity? How much value does that add to your identity? We're family. My brothers and sisters, take note of this. Before James talks to them about anger, he reminds them we're a part of a family together. Listen, in other words, even if you're right, remember that relationships are more important than being right. That might be something to write down. Don't violate that principle over the next 4 months. Even if you're right, remember that relationships are more important than being right. I talked about foster care a bit ago. I heard some things, even from some extended, distant family members and church family members during that season where politics, ideology would get leaked. And those conversations are hurtful. When you lead with your political filter instead of your faith filter, listen, when you're in conflict or you're having an argument or a difficult conversation, our ears stop listening. Our minds start shutting down, and unfortunately, our hearts start getting hard. So James very clearly says if we're going to produce the righteousness that God desires, we have to change the way we respond. Everybody should be. How did he say it? My brothers and sisters, dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen. This is the second tool in your toolbox. Reflect before you react. Reflect before you react. Oh, reacting is so easy. It comes quickly, doesn't it? We just respond. Reflect. How did he say it? Everyone should be quick to listen. Some of us have completely forgotten how to listen. Most of us are quick to speak and slow to listen. We'll fire off that tweet so fast it'll make your head spin. James says the very first thing you should do is be quick to listen. By the way, this is exactly what we want other people to do for us. The problem is we're so busy thinking about how we're going to respond that we fail to listen, right? Here's the thing about conflict. We both, if I'm in an argument, we both want the same thing. We want exactly what the person we're having a conflict with wants. Both parties want to be heard and understood. I want you to be quick to listen and slow to speak. And you want me to be quick to listen and slow to speak. I don't want to argue. I don't want you to argue with me. I want you to hear me. After all, I can't really hear you until I feel like you have heard me, and you can't really hear me until you feel like I have heard you. Could I encourage you to listen to people who don't experience the world the way you do? This is important during a political season. It's important during every season. But listen, we all have biases based on our experiences and based on our upbringing. Listen to people who don't experience the world the way you do and have. So listen to their story. if you ask the follow-up question and you listen, people will tell you their story. Listen to their experiences, and as they share them, ask yourself, how might that shape their filter of the way they see the world differently than me? Listen to why they believe what they believe. Listen to people who are different than you. We're often quick to speak, to tell them our mind. James says, be quick to listen. He has a follow-up right behind that, doesn't he? Let's look back at the text. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen. Right along with that, part B after part A, be slow to speak. Be slow to speak. So number 3, restrain your remarks. That's so hard. That's even easier for me to say it than to do it. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but I kind of have the gift of gab. I like to talk. Restrain your remarks. James said, be slow to speak. If you do a word study of what's going on there in the Greek text, it literally means this. Get this. Be late. Be late. When I served at a previous church on an elder team there, we had one of our elders, his name, I'll leave his name. Great guy. He was often the last to speak. I'll tell you his name. His name was Neil. Neil. And I would find myself in the middle of a conversation when we were wrestling things to the ground. I would find myself looking at him. What's he thinking right now? I wanted to hear what he had to say. Why? Because he was often late to speak. There's something here to learn, and I think about that occasionally. Is it better to be late to speak? And I would add, if you have something to say, maybe first ask a question. Why? Because the minute I start speaking, I stop listening, which means I stop learning. I'm not hearing you and what you're thinking about, what you're wrestling through. I'm going to say something that might sound so obvious, you might miss it. It's this. Everybody's behavior makes perfect sense to them. Think about it. Your behavior makes perfect sense to you. The way you react makes perfect sense to you. You don't have to think about it. It makes perfect sense to you. Everybody's response in a conversation or an argument makes perfect sense to them. Everybody's viewpoint makes perfect sense to them. Everybody's politics, because of those things, makes perfect sense to them. Are you ready for a profound statement? Listen, this one's free. When we don't understand, it's because we don't understand. Think about that. Think about how that might shape the way you do political conversations over the next couple of months. When you hear yourself saying, I don't know why they would do that. I don't know why they would think that. I don't know why they would believe that. I don't even know why they would say that. When you find yourself thinking those things, you're actually making a confession. This is something you don't understand. Maybe it's time to listen so that you can understand. Maybe it's time to have a conversation with somebody who is not like you. Here's the problem with social media. Oh, there's a lot of problems with social media, but one of the big problems are the algorithms. You know about this? When you click on a news article on Facebook, for example, it's going to feed you more stories that are way different than that. You're going to hear both sides of every viewpoint. Now, the exact opposite. When you click on that article, you're going to be fed more articles that are saying the exact same things, and you don't even know if it's written by a person or by AI or a Russian bot, or I don't even know. The more you read these stories, here's the deal, the smaller your echo chamber becomes. You keep listening to the same thing said over and over again. Social media is designed to reinforce, get this, what you already believe. It's designed to do that because it makes a lot of money doing that, because then they can target you ads on things that you actually want to see. Listen, in marriage counseling, We're often taught active listening is an important thing. You have to listen to what the other person is saying. I hear you say, is this what you're saying? And repeat it back. Echo chambers are killing our national discourse. And I'm afraid that they are profoundly hurting your family Thanksgiving dinner time. Seek to understand before you seek to be understood. Become a student, not a critic. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. We have 4 of these tools, right? Let's go to the text first. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Number 4, this one might surprise you. Recognize the results. What? Let me explain. What did he say? Be slow to become angry. Being slow to become angry, get this is both a result and a decision. You're willfully deciding, yeah, I'm not going to get angry, but it's a result of the clause that came right before it. If you're quick to listen and slow to speak, you're less likely to become angry. And it's easier then for you to guard against that anger just boiling up over in your vein on your forehead or your neck or wherever your vein is pulsing. Can we just acknowledge something? We all express anger differently. Some of you blow up and some of you clam up. You don't have to raise your hands, but which camp would you put yourself in? Are you a blow-up or are you a clam-up type of person? For those who blow up, oh, you feel so much better. I just let it out. Let the relief valve just blow steam. Nobody else feels good in that moment, but you sure do. And for those of you that clam up, well, then you sulk around, woe is me, until somebody asks, well, what's wrong with you? Nothing. I'm fine. For both ways we express anger, get this. This is your way of trying to grab back some control. Remember, anger in and of itself is not a sin. Jesus got anger. The Apostle Paul tells us, don't let your anger don't sin. So you're going to get angry sometimes. It's how you respond to your anger. Ooh, that's when it can become sin. James gives us this formula. The longer you listen, the more you'll learn, the less angry you will be. Now, James will give us the reason why. Let's go back to the text. Slow to become angry because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. That's what he desires for you. King Jesus desires you to live out your life exemplifying his righteousness. Human anger gets in the way of that. This is different than righteous anger. Jesus responded with righteous anger. What makes it righteous? When religion was used as an excuse to mistreat people. Your faith filter, your political filter, is it possible some of that might be happening right now? James is saying, I'm talking about sinful anger here because that anger doesn't produce the righteousness that God desires. There's 3 agendas at play at any conversation. You need to recognize this. You've got your agenda, you've got the argument, their agenda, and then you've got God's agenda. My anger produces only what I desire because I know I'm right, and I want you to know that I'm right. Your anger only produces what you desire, and if you're not careful, if I'm not careful, both of those can go against what God desires. What does he desire? Let's keep reading the text, shall we? Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent. Remember, knee-jerk, oh, that's about them. That's speaking to me, that's speaking to you. And humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. There's a bunch of words here. I don't have time to unpack all of them, but let's talk about moral filth. This word means to dishonor. When we take things and we make them a moral issue, we have to be so careful. We can cross lines by how we talk. Evil. This could be translated as malice. Malice is the desire to get even. It's a desire to pay back. Watch your malice level over the next several months. Humbly. Listen, we're going to talk about humility here in a couple of weeks, so I don't want to step on those toes. But humility says we are more important than me. We are more important. We are more important than me. The text said, humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. The word planted in you, this is Jesus. The New Testament makes it clear, this logos. This is Jesus. You're followers of Jesus. That's your greatest loyalty. Remember who you belong to over the next few months. Remember who you are, and remember whose you are. I could preach a whole sermon on that line. We tend to think of this through the lens of identity politics, who you are. You're a child of God. You were bought with a price. Remember whose you are. We've spent all summer talking about this cats and dogs series we just concluded. If you're a Jesus follower, you have a master. His name is King Jesus. Can I say it this way? King trumps president. I have to be careful with that. That sounds awfully like a campaign slogan. I don't mean it that way. Let me say it this way. King Jesus, has more authority in your life than president. When King Jesus is firmly seated on the throne of your life, it becomes less important who occupies the Oval Office. So, with that as a backdrop, let me ask you the question again. Are you willing to put your faith filter ahead of your political filter? Are you? This fall, your political candidate will win or lose based on how many people vote for them. However, the church, God's kingdom, the movement that King Jesus seeks to lead through your life and mine, the church wins or loses based on how we treat each other. How does a follower of Jesus respond with civility? Well, we disagree respectfully. When you win an argument, you don't win anything. You've burned a bridge and you've given up the relationship because you just have to be right. You want to be right at each other. God wants you to be right with each other. You could study conversion stories all through the Bible. Civility is pretty important through this process. We're not going to reach the world through obnoxious Facebook posts. By the way, you're one. You have one life to invest. Who's the one life you're investing in? Your one is reading your posts. Did they see King Jesus as you type and as you post? I want to end today with a prayer time. I want to go inward if we can. I want to give you 4 questions to ask yourself, and then I'm going to give you some space to wrestle that out with King Jesus. The conversations, the political conversations you're getting ready to have over the next week or weeks or months. Here's a question to ask. Is what I'm going to say true? This is the problem with social media. We can fast forward and forward so quickly. Sometimes it's not even true. We're perpetuating a lie. By the way, we all use hyperbole to make our point. We say all Colts fans are like this. We say all Democrats are like this. No Republican would ever care about this. Ask yourself the question, is what I'm getting ready to say true? Second question, is what I'm getting ready to say helpful? Gossip might be true, but that doesn't make it helpful. Is it helpful for building others up? Is what I'm getting ready to say helpful? Number 3, is what I'm getting ready to say personal? We can discuss ideas without attacking character. We don't use social media to debate something personal. Again, this past week, how many of these friends were they missing each other? And I just wonder, if you were to sit down in a coffee shop over a cup of coffee, could there be some common ground to be found? Number 4 is what I'm going to say, loving. Those are important questions. I love what the author Frederick Buechner says. Although kindness is not the same thing as holiness, it's awfully close. Although kindness is not the same thing as holiness, it's awfully close. Here's the goal for this series. We can disagree politically and love unconditionally. I put 4 questions up on the screen. I want to put them up on the big screen right now, and I want to give you space to wrestle through those questions and get real with King Jesus. Ask him to divide your heart. Ask him, are you putting your faith filter above your political filter? Would you bow your heads? Would you close your eyes? I want to give you space and margin to do that right now.